Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. There's one thing I don't like, it's seeing the gauge lines on a dovetail. If you look at these two examples, one I like, one I don't, I'm going to show you how to cut your dovetails without having visible gauge lines. Stick with me. I'm Rob Cosman and welcome to my shop. We make it our job to help you take your woodworking to the next level. If you're new to our channel, be sure to subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and don't forget to turn on the notification on your mobile device so you'll know every time we release a new video. Good? All right, back to the bench. I've heard the argument over the years that marking gauge lines on dovetails show that it's done by hand. I've even heard people talk about going in and adding it to machine cut dovetails to make it look done by hand. None of that floats my boat. It's all somewhat deceptive. I really don't like to see marking gauge lines, especially on a piece of furniture. On a drawer, it's more accepting, but when we go through this today, when you actually build a drawer, it's far easier to get rid of the gauge lines on a drawer because of the way it's built than it is to get rid of it on a case, something highly visible like this, unless you plan for it ahead of time. And for those who think that a marking gauge line gives some authenticity to the piece, I'm not buying that one. I'm going to go through and I'm going to tell you exactly what I would do to avoid seeing a gauge line. If you make your gauge lines too deep, you've got to remove so much material to get rid of it that it often alters the piece, particularly something like this that has a mitered edge up here. If I had to take down a whole lot of material, you're going to offset where the miter actually ends. So these are things you need to pay attention to if you want to take that dovetailing work to the next level. So the first, I suppose, obvious way of getting rid of a gauge line is to simply plane it off. And I'm going to actually do one to show you just how deep it goes, even though it doesn't look that deep. But there's a couple of cautions, and this is probably the most obvious. So frequently when you chop your material between your pins, you'll see what happens. The wood fibers break out. They never come right out to the surface, but they come really close. So if you look right there, I've got a gaping hole there and there that's maybe a 32nd of an inch below the surface. Well, if you end up planing off more than you anticipate in order to get rid of a gauge line, you may very well expose this, and it starts to show up as a translucent spot at the bottom of a tail, and it looks really bad. And if you're trying to do it on a drawer, you may end up actually destroying your fit because you've had to take off so much. So I've got a pine dovetail here, and I'm just going to go through and see what we have to do in order to get rid of the gauge line. Notice it doesn't disappear evenly. Okay, I would guess and say that that looks to be gone. However, my drawer may not have been able to tolerate removing that much material, or, as I said with this example, I may have started to expose some really thin wood right at the base of the pin, and that looks terrible, particularly when you put a finish on it because it only makes it stand out worse. There's another solution. So this method is going to take a little more time. You got to be a little more careful, and if it's worth doing a piece right, then it's worth investing the time. So here's your piece of wood. I would go ahead and have my marking gauge set. I always want to identify the face piece. So this is going to be the face. I'll take my marking gauge. This is going to be the tailboard, by the way. And I'll go ahead and I'll mark the edge. I'll mark the inside face nice and deep. I like to have a deep marking gauge line to register my chisel. Nothing out here. I'll go ahead and I would lay this out. I have a video that explains all of this if you need a reference. Hey, if you like this video, we have more. Our newsletter has subscriber-only content, monthly discount on tools, and anything we bring out that's new, subscribers get first crack at it. Click on the link below. Let's get back to work. I've got it laid out. Now I'm going to take my dovetail marker, and I'm going to continue the lines down the face, but I'm going to make them longer than they may otherwise need to be, meaning I'm going past where I suspect the gauge line is going to be. My lines here, Same marking gauge setting. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to run my mark where I'm actually going to chisel. A nice thing about this style of marking gauge is you can see where it makes contact and you can simply roll it in order to get that extra little bit. Old style gauges, that was very difficult because as soon as you set the beam down, you lost sight of the pin. Put that in there. Go to this one. Now, if you're worried about having marking gauge lines, or pardon me, layout lines going deeper than you want, which sometimes your saw will end up following them, I just take a piece of masking tape, because this is ultimately going to be planed off anyway. But to avoid any mistakes when I'm actually doing the sawing, I can come in here, put this right on that line, and now I don't have to worry about sawing past those lines. Now, when I'm done, I don't have nasty marking gauge lines to get rid of on the tails. All the extra lines are already gone. Takes a little bit longer, but it's a guarantee not to fall into that problem. Now, if you don't want to go through with the tape, there's one other thing you could do, and that is come in here with your square and simply line up the two lines. Now, I always use my marking gauge to give me my line that goes all the way around. That gives you your absolute best accuracy. Don't like doing this, but if I had to, I could come in and with a pencil or lightly with a pen, I could actually draw that line all the way across. That would, again, allow me to stop my dovetail lines where I need to, but I still would be able to come in with my gauge and simply mark in between them. Now, this last way, if you're new, you may not want to do this, and I'll show you why. Take your piece. This is your face, one you don't want marks on. Do the side. This is assuming you're laying out the tailboard. Nice and heavy on the inside. And again, the reason is, it makes it so much easier for your chisel to register. Now on this side, come in and make a very light pass, just enough so that you can see it. The downside to that is when it comes to chiseling, it's very difficult for the chisel to register in that very small line. Whereas with a heavy gauge line, you put your chisel in there and it'll hold it, and there's no trying to guess whether or not you're sitting in the marking gauge line. On this one, you'd even have to get the light just right in order to be able to see it. Doable, but not the easiest. If you like my work and enjoy my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos and help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said, better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the link below, the chisel and plane icon, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our online and in-person workshops.